Hello, good morning, everybody, and good evening to some of our guests that have joined us from down under in Australia. Listen, I just want to start by saying thank you to all of you for being here with me this morning, talking about virtual leadership. Why? Because, hey, we're in lockdown and we are in and out of virtual meetings all day long. And whilst so many people tell us that learning and development and personal development is really, really important to us, getting onto yet another virtual Zoom or Teams meeting or Hangout is something that is pretty tough for some of us sometimes. So I'm really grateful for all of you being here and joining me this morning. So for those of you who don't know me, and by the way, it's great to see a lovely mix of people that I do know, but also some people that I don't know on the participant list this morning. So fantastic. So for those that don't know me, my name is Mel Ross, and I am the CEO and founder of an organization called Adapt Digital. Who are we and what we do? Very quickly, for the last 8 years, we've been working all over the world with governments and private sector organizations, really focusing on leaders and helping leaders develop and become the best digital age leaders that they can be. And the way that we've done that is by using our framework, and our framework is called the Dylan Way. I'm probably going to be touching base with that framework during this morning. But what do we hear about this morning? We hear about virtual leadership. And given that we've been working in the world of digital age leadership for so many years, what we thought as soon as lockdown started happening and we had that announcement from the World Health Organization, we thought as a team, let's work out and let's see what's out there with regards to remote and virtual leadership and working, and see whether we can put something together and see how aligned that is with the framework that we use and the work that we do with our customers. And some of that is what I want to share with you this morning. But before we kick off, I've got a wee poll. So I'm going to kick off with a poll, but just to let you know, you do have a chat section, so please, I've made sure that everybody can chat with each other. I can see I've got some good morning folks coming on the side there. So if you've got any questions as I'm going through, or even something as simple as, Mel, you're going too fast, I didn't understand that, pop it into the chat area and I'll try and keep an eye on that as we go through. I'm not very good at multitasking, I'm going to tell you that now, but I'll do my best. So if you can bear with me. So what I want to do is kick off with a poll. And this is just for us to really understand who we are, and for me to get a feel for who we've got here on the actual call today. So this is what I've got here. So which best describes your focus and interest in the area of virtual leadership, that I might call VL as we're going through? Okay, so I've got people coming in. Am I a practitioner or an agent in change supporting others? Am I a leader myself, or am I a little bit of both? So that's what I'm looking for. Okay, so we've got a lot of practitioners and agents of change here. Now, I've opened this up as a multiple choice question. So what I'd like to do now is, anyone that put a bit of both really, can I ask you now to also click on which one of the top two, am I a practitioner or am I a leader, is the one that you feel is most relevant to you, even though I know that you're doing a bit of both. So crack on and click a second one for which one is the most. Okay, so it looks like half of the people that we've got on the video call this morning are actual practitioners and agents of change. And that's really important for me because even though we're talking about virtual leadership, there's something really, really important that I want to talk to you about today, which is the heart of our framework in the Dylan Way. And it's this very important word. And I'm hoping that you can see that on the screen above me, you. Whether we are helping other leaders or whether we are an agent of change ourselves, the most important and the most successful way of bringing others on the journey with us is by being the change we want to see in others in ourselves. So focusing on ourselves. And I know that a lot of change agents and practitioners out there have been working so incredibly hard over the last few weeks with regards to lockdown, getting us all remote, getting us all on the technology, making sure that everybody is okay from a learning and development perspective and a well-being perspective. But there is also that self-development piece as well. So as a practitioner, all of this virtual leadership stuff is as relevant to you as it is for the people that you're supporting around you. So as I'm going through these slides, don't just be thinking about what I can be doing for my team or what I can be doing for my leaders in the organization. Think also about what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me for being a virtual leader? So on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen with you now. I'm going to take you on a wee bit of a journey. There's going to be some slides there. There is theory, so we have to go through that journey of theory. It starts with knowledge that we go into doing, and then we can go into being. So let's crack on with some of these, and I can start sharing our story with you. So virtual leadership. I started off by saying, there we were, lockdowns happened, and we thought, how does this relate to the work that we've already been doing? So we've been forced into virtual leadership, we've been forced into remote and virtual working, and it's become an imperative very, very quickly. Therefore, it's a challenge and it's an opportunity. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to think about, what does virtual leadership mean? So we went away and we scrambled around and we looked at different definitions of virtual leadership. And I can tell you, anybody that's on this call this morning that has done any work in the world of digital will know that every man and his dog has got a different definition of digital. Hopefully we've put that one to bed now. It's exactly the same with virtual leadership. There are so many different definitions, and having gone through this stage of being forced into virtual leadership, I think it's really good now that we can actually have a single global view of what this means. Knowing what it means by definition is going to help us in terms of being a better virtual leader and helping others become a virtual leader. So we honed in on 3 definitions. And the first definition is the one that you can see on the screen here. And why? Well, it's the Wikipedia one. It's the most obvious one that we all come up to when we go to the big house of G, house of Google, dispersed work. So it's about virtual teams and dispersed leadership. So that's the first thing. Then the second definition that we decided to look at and we thought was really relevant, but not complete and whole in its own right, was this one from Global Integration, talking about virtual management and virtual leadership. Now, I like this one because what it does here is it talks about, and look at that second sentence, across functions. Now, think for a moment of your own system and think, during the lockdown phase, has there been a natural kind of decrease in these silos in terms of, I'm no longer Jill from the finance department. I'm actually Jill with 2 dogs living at home in X, Y, and Z. So there's a sense that there's a slight decrease in these corporate silos. And that's really interesting. We thought that was great. And of course, at the end here, what have we got? We've got this sense of the human coming back into it and that authentic element of leadership. So I like that one. But the best one that I thought was, touching on nearly there, but not quite complete, around defining virtual leadership was the one that you can see here. PMI, the Project Management Institute. Interestingly enough, they've been doing quite a lot of work on virtual leadership over the last few years. So if you want to get into the academic of it, I'd suggest going to their website, and there's quite a few blogs and research pieces there on it. But this is from an academic piece from Herman 2005, and I love it because I think this really starts to look at the heart of it all. Look at that third sentence. Leadership is moving from group-centered to individually centered. Now, if ever there was a truism, right? We've gone from a room or an office where there's 100 people working in one single space, and we can manage teams collectively, to 100 people working in 100 different homes. And all of a sudden, we've got that disbursement. So I think that working less at group and more at individual is a huge element of virtual leadership that we need to be aware of. few other things in there, but for the sake of this morning, I think those three definitions are really, really important. But they're not really bringing it all together as much as we have experienced over the last few weeks. But what do these three definitions tell us? Well, without a doubt, it isn't this brand new thing. The fundamentals of leadership are absolutely the same, but what I like to say is they've been pimped up. So there's elements that have been pimped up. And the other thing is that leadership by definition is shifting. Now, I want you to do a thought experiment now. So stay with me. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the last few weeks and think to yourself, can you remember an instance, either for yourself or people around you, where the idea of leadership has shifted in as much as it's been a little bit more shared with regards to coming up with a decision or a solution? Or have you actually taken the autonomy and actually made a decision that you might in the office not necessarily make? You might just pop your head in around the door of the office of your boss and say, hey, just quickly before I do so and so and so and so. But because we haven't got that relationship anymore, we've actually started to make those decisions. And also looking for opportunities. You know, there is opportunity here. There is a real sense of good stuff happening. So what I want you to do is to just in the chat area, just put some thumbs up if you can think of an instance, if you yourself have experienced a little bit of that shared or dispersed leadership, because if you have, then you are experiencing some of that virtual leadership piece. Now, this one I think everybody's going to relate to. There are things to celebrate. If we get it right, virtual leadership should be about less and more productive meetings. And I must admit, I'm not too sure how well we're doing on this one at the moment, because even last week when I was speaking to one of our practitioners, and we have practitioners all over the world, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and he was half asleep, he was brain dead, he could barely speak, and he was like, Mel, I'm zoomed out. I'm going from one meeting to the next. It's just crazy. I'm having more meetings, not less. That's the wrong way around it. So I think from a virtual leadership perspective, we as virtual leaders need to be helping and evidencing how we can have less and more productive meetings, because that's what it's all about. And equally, there's some things here that we're doing with some customers down in Australia, which is just shifting how we are perceiving meetings. Because if we're in a virtual environment, we aren't necessarily having that sense of everybody comes into the meeting room, they sit down, they have a wee bit of a chat with each other, you can feel the energy in the room, and then the meeting starts. We don't really have that. You know, it doesn't really happen. So we need to put something in. And the way that we've done it, and some of our customers down under have had some fantastic results, is just starting all of our meetings 10 minutes earlier. And we do this as a team in work all the time. So we start every meeting 10 minutes earlier. And in that 10 minutes, people come in, cup of tea, you know, how you doing? You know, how are the kids? What's happening, you know, have you done your daily exercise yet, etc., etc. But what's good about that is we're noticing that when the meeting starts, it's banging, people are focused, and the meetings themselves are even becoming less. One of the other things that we're doing, which I'm going to try and do on this on this session today, but I don't know whether I will or not, is we're purposefully putting an extra 10 minutes at the end of meetings if we need it. And those extra 10 minutes are called buffer 10s. And a buffer 10 is this. You can either use those 10 minutes for reflection so that you can actually think, what did I just hear? What did we just do? I need to do some immediate actions from that meeting before I go on to the next one. Or equally, just prepare for the next one. So just having that, you know, focus on beginning and end. More collaborative collaboration practice, more collaborative practice is definitely happening. I mentioned that earlier on. There's a big thing here about less decisions and perhaps better decisions. Again, I'm going to speak to that one a little bit later on too. One of the important things that we should be celebrating about virtual leadership is this: vision, purpose, value, and direction. Because we don't have toilets where on the back of the toilet door you can have the values of the organization, our culture, or we haven't got the meeting rooms anymore where we've got the big posters that say these are our 5 values, that visual stuff isn't around anymore. So what we want to be doing is we want to be thinking about how do we get the vision, the purpose, the value, and the direction into the 100 homes of our employees and our workers. It's with us as the leaders. Virtual leadership is about living and breathing and reminding people of the vision, purpose, value, and direction, and having that clarity. So not just relying on people reading things on the doors. Things to watch along the way? Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, everybody's going to see some things here, and I want to know whether any of this is actually resonating with you. So the first thing is the human side. Everything has become more human, and I think that's both a brilliant thing to be celebrating, but also something for us to be watching, because it means that we need to, as leaders, become more human in the way that we're leading. And, you know, for me, I think that that's a brilliant thing, because there's a sense of formality that has been removed from the old corporate system. And I hope that we're all going to take a little bit of that informality, a little bit of that human back in to that new reality. Virtual leadership is about being prepared as well. It's about being able to shepherd, facilitate, and mediate all at once. When we are in these virtual environments, we cannot see what's happening from the shoulder down, but neither can we feel the energy of what's happening in here. Equally, we don't know what's happening either side of these meetings, what's happening in those spaces. So there's a huge amount of things that we need to be watching and becoming more empathetic about and becoming more focused on as virtual leaders. And then there's a few other things in there, you know, don't eat the elephant, micromanagement. Sense and dealing with conflict is really important. Hopefully I'll have a chance to talk to you a little bit more about that as we crack on. So, lockdown isn't going to happen forever, right? No, it's not. And there's a lot of countries and there's a lot of our customers that are already starting to make their way into what is a new reality. And those of you that know our work will remember the new reality game that we do in a lot of our workshops. The key thing here is having that release, power up, and augment. So there's 3 elements. You can do this yourself, and I'd like you to be thinking about this as I go through each one of these. You can do it at a group environment. You can do it as part of leadership development, but it's really, really important for us as leaders to get our head around what the new reality could look like. A, to be prepared, and B, to have the courage to help others to bring them on the journey with us. So the first thing is release. Now, you think about this, right? We've gone into lockdown. There's probably conversations that we can all remember with people saying, no, there's no way in a month of Sundays we're going to be able to ever go remote in our area of the business. No way. No, we'll never be able to go online with that, because it's really important for us to have that face-to-face, etc., etc., etc. Well, we're here and we're doing it, and it's working. So it's really good for us to spend some time and think about what are the things that we don't need to take back into that new reality, that we can release off to the old world. And a lot of those things that are good now for us to release are the things that are part of the old system anyway. They're not part of this new system, the new networked ecosystem that life and work is all about. So for a moment, think about any of the things that you are not doing that you were doing before lockdown, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not even missing it. I don't need to do it. Write them down, share them, vocalize them, be clear about what they are. And then the second one is power up. And power up is a big one for us, because what this is, it alludes to the point that I mentioned earlier on. The elements of leadership that are as relevant today as they ever have been, but we need to pimp their ride. Right, so we're talking about empathy, we're talking about purpose, we're talking about role modeling, we're talking really about those power skills, we're talking really about the soft skills of old that we call are the power skills of the new. and that's really, really important. So I'm loving, actually, I'm just having a quick look here just at some of the chat, and Nicola, thank you. Change in the NHS and doctors' views on remote consultations and is transformational for us. Absolutely. And you know what, that is something that, you know, a lot of consultants and a lot of doctors probably wouldn't have believed could have worked and be successful prior to lockdown. So there really are those things that are happening and amazing that we should be really focusing on. So back to Power Up. What I mean Power Up. So we want to really think about those soft skills and make them power skills, because as virtual leaders, the soft skills of old are the power skills of the new world. So in the new reality, our own leadership, helping others become leaders, is really focusing on those soft skills. And the final one, which I really love, is augment. What are the things that are unique, that we haven't ever done before, that are unique to us, our systems, the way that we think and behave, that we want to take into that new reality with us? And don't just say, right, okay, we're back now, we can get rid of it. So release, power up, and augment. Now, there's a lovely little exercise that you can do, which is, I'm just going to put it up here now, which is what we call, and it's all values based, so I'll do this quickly with you. It's called value depreciation, value appreciation. So it's all about value, right? And essentially, all you need to do is just basically think about, there's two halves, right? And one half is the appreciation, and the second half is the depreciation. And basically, all you want to do is think to yourself, since I've been in lockdown, what are the things that I'm doing that are now more value? They've gained value in the way that I'm behaving different, and the things that I'm doing differently, or the way that I'm thinking differently. And actually, I've appreciated value. And equally, what are the things that I'm no longer doing that are no longer valuable to me? So the depreciation. And when you've got that values-based conversation, people connect with it and they're more likely to actually engage with you. So that's a simpler version of the new reality game. So we call it the depreciation, appreciation, value exercise. So let's have a look at some of these things. So computer says no. Things to release. Micromanagement doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work anymore. And actually, it's really interesting. I don't know. So the folks that are here on the video call from the UK will see in the papers that there's been some stuff around managers saying that, you know, workers have to fill out timesheets because they really want to know what people are doing in between the spaces. And, you know, if you're home, I don't want you to be putting the clothes in the washing machine. Is irrelevant. The construct of time has changed. So virtual leaders don't think about time. What they think about is attention. I'll come on to that in a moment. Profit before purpose. Now, I'm talking about public sector as well as private sector here, but it's really no longer a benefit for anybody to be chasing profitability. What we want to be doing is we want to be chasing the human factor and purpose. We want to be chasing the experience. And those of you that know me, again, I harp on about this. It's really important. 2012, the Born of Digital Transformation, Capgemini piece of research. What did they do and what did they say? If you chase that experience, you are more likely to be up to 26% more profitable as a result, instead of focusing and chasing on the profit. Now, when we're thinking about public sector, rather than the profitability, a lot of the time we are so focused on productivity and efficiency and savings. Same thing, same thing. And I don't know how, you know, whether any of that is resonating with you guys. And the third thing is humans as labels. It's not Jill from finance anymore. You know, it's Jill, the human being. It's not Mel, the CEO of Adapter Digital. It's Mel, the wife and, you know, mother of two furries. We have really got to understand ourselves a little bit more as humans. And wow, I think that's brilliant. So ditch the labels. We don't need that. And disconnection, as I mentioned about the silos earlier on. hanging on to the bath water. So just a little bit about that, that middle piece that I was talking about earlier on about the power up. These are the things that we want to power up. We want to power up trust and resilience. By the way, when I talk about resilience, I'm not talking about the military resilience, get somebody to go to the extreme to build resilience. I'm talking about strength-based resilience. We need to really hone in on who we are in terms of our strengths elements. Adaptiveness, experimental practice, I'll talk to you about that in a moment. Communication. Now, this is an interesting one. The majority of leaders are very good communicators. That's probably one of the reasons why they become leaders, arguably or not, I don't know. But the key thing about virtual leadership is multi-channel communication. When you've got 100 people from one space into 100 different private spaces, the way that we communicate with all of them needs to be on multiple levels, formally and informally. Everybody has a visual preference, an auditory preference, or a narrative text preference. So as leaders, for us to lead that dispersed individual group as opposed to the single group, multi-level communication is super, super important. And the other thing is redefining productivity. Again, if you want to know a little bit more about that one, I'll try and touch on it a little bit later on. But the most important thing about productivity is about productivity in terms of attention and participation, rather than how many times did you do that and how many hours did you work. And of course, those new, unique things to boldly go when no organization has gone before, networked ecosystem. Those of you that know me and our work and framework will be very familiar with the concept of networked ecosystem. Now, think of this, for those of you that aren't. You've gone into lockdown, and I'll use that same analogy. You've gone from a group of people that might be 100 employees, it might even be 1,000 employees, and the majority are suddenly dispersed in single entity units. That's not a matrix. What that is, it's like a human blood system. So as virtual leaders, what we want to be doing now is we want to be thinking to ourselves, how do we connect all of those people and create environments to empower and enable this kind of this bloodstream, this nervous system of energy and collective intelligence around us. And that's not as hard as it might sound, and it's not as ethereal or theoretical as it might sound either. There's some really simple practical things that you can do to start to really bring that networked ecosystem alive and take it into that new reality. Don't leave it at the door at the end of lockdown. Virtual social capital, talk about in a moment. Hyperhuman and decentralization, I will talk about in a moment. So we did all of that research, we looked at all of that stuff, and then we thought to ourselves, so is there a definition of virtual leadership that fits for us? And to be fair, yes, there is. It might not fit for you, but for the sake of us and the work that we do with our practitioners and our customers all over the world, this is really what we're talking about. Key takeouts here. So there's some call outs, not just to effectively lead, but to effectively serve. Remotely and virtually through synchronous and asynchronous human-centered engagement. So we're leading and serving at the same time. We're as equally focused on individuals as we are on groups. So no longer am I a senior chief officer and I'm just focused on getting all of my info from the person that I line manage. I really am now starting to focus and participate and connect with people in a more dispersed way. So balance individual and group, and of course the human-centered piece. If you've got definitions of virtual leadership that you've created for your own systems or for yourself, I would love to hear them. So please, put them into the chat. I'd love to see what you guys have got. So that's aside. Now I want to do a little bit of a step change now. I want to talk a little bit about what does virtual leadership look like in a little bit more detail. So we're building a lot of virtual leadership training and programs in order to support our practitioners. And the way that we're looking at it is this. What you see on this slide here are what we call the 4 quadrants of digital age leadership focus. So it's a ripple effect. And basically is you always start with yourself in order for you then to better work and affect change. in your team or your peer group, and then as the organization in your networked ecosystem, and also beyond that in your community. For the sake of virtual leadership, going through each one of those is not really that pertinent and not really that necessary. What we've realized is for virtual leadership, there are two focus areas. So for you yourself, and also if you're developing virtual leadership programs or just conversations with leaders around you, think about two areas. So it's the leader themselves looking inward and what do they need to do to become better role models as virtual leaders themselves, yourself. And then the second thing is clumping the peer, the organization, the community together, because to be fair, you know, virtual working is virtual living, right? So what I want to do is just look at that inward focus now, and it's all about self-mastery. So it's all about really becoming more aware of who we are. So we've put together 5/6 key points that can help you yourself become more effective as a virtual leader, but also if you are designing or delivering leadership interventions and programs for people around you. So the first thing is brand. Dead simple. Dead simple. However, I was on the phone yesterday with a customer in Europe, a large global bank. And one of the interesting things that he shared with me was when I talked to him about brand, is he said one of the conversations that he's been having with their executive leadership team is that they've forgotten how to be human. So they're a leader and then they're a human, but they're not both. And they've struggled in lockdown because all of a sudden they're bringing the two together. So spending some time yourself on your brand, who you are, your profile as a leader, and also making sure that there's time for the leaders around you to do the same thing. Super, super important. So who I am as a human and a leader, and how do those two things come together, which is really getting us to that place of authenticity. And then we can look at narrative, and then we can look at communication. Now, this is super important for virtual and remote working. Why? Because when we're on Zooms like this, you know, it's harder for us to understand what people are seeing and hearing and feeling from us. So we need to actually bring that human and leader together so that we are being more authentic. So there's very much bringing the human to work. And this is a little exercise that you can do. If you would like me to share this worksheet with you so that you can do it yourself or with your leadership teams, send me an email, because you've all got my email, or just pop it in the chat here and I'll send it to you. But basically, on the bottom, what we have is what we call here in Adapted Digital, the team, we call it brand triangle. So hopefully you can see this, but I'm going to talk you through it. So bottom left, what kind of leader are you in terms of brand? So you understand who your brand is. So 3 points about you. Then who are the core audiences that you exist to serve or interact with? And then looking at your narrative. So those of you that I've got a couple of practitioners on the call this morning, which is great, you guys will be aware of that. But for virtual leadership, we need to pimp that up as well, and we need to look at a second level of brand and profile, and that's what you've got at the top here. Who you are as a human. What are your core strengths? Now, my core strengths, I'm a motivator. I'm a giver. I'm a sharer. If it's there to share, I'll share it. So I'm really open and with sharing. So understand what your core strengths are as a human being. Every leader needs to do this. A lot of leaders don't do this, and if we can support them to do that and recognize that, really important. Next one is subject strength. What do you know that nobody else knows? Now, that absolutely could be subject matter expertise, you know, because the majority of us are in leadership roles because of the knowledge that we've got. However, there might be knowledge outside of that. Let me give you an example. I'm mentoring a leader at the moment, and we're chatting through this brand element at the beginning of our program, and we're talking, and he says to me, which actually was a bit of a surprise to me, we were talking about what do you know that other people don't know, and he said, Mel, I've just finished a mindfulness course. I'm really into mindfulness. I meditate every single day. I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's absolutely fantastic. So it's not just your subject matter expertise. It's actually what things do you know that are part of the profile of virtual leadership that you can bring into your authenticity, into how you lead. And mindfulness and presence, super important. And then the final one on the top right, and hopefully you can see that, but it says experience strength, where you've been. And again, a lot of us, and you don't have to be a leader by label for this one, a lot of us forget that actually we've been through a lot of change already. We've been in similar situations. So spending a wee bit of time and thinking to yourself, God, I remember when I did, that thing in 2000 that was, totally amazing at the time. This is a little bit similar. If you share those stories and those experiences with people, they become more open to change and they have more trust in the change. So it's really important for us to understand that as well. So that's brand. What's the second thing about virtual leadership? Well, the second thing about virtual leadership competency and profiling is the power of one. And this is absolutely key to the Dylan Way framework. And it separates into 4 things that you can see on here. Sadly, I don't have the time to go through the detail with you, but if you want to know more, just please let me know. You've got to be a role model. Number 1, you've got to be the change you want to see in others. Even through lockdown, we need the leaders to participate and be active in remote working, in getting onto Yammer and having some informal chats and doing some yam jams and so on and so forth. You've got to be the early adopter as well as evidencing that role model leadership, because that will bring people with you. And the equal thing to that is making sure that you take role model leadership back out into the new reality. First principle thinking. Quickly on chat, give me a thumbs up if you've heard of first principles thinking before. Let me have a look. Would love a copy of the template, Mel. No problem. Sandy, how you doing? Oh, it's great to see some people that I know here on. It's excellent. So, yes, first principle thinking is from science. The most famous first principle thinker, Elon Musk. And there's a great, if you go onto YouTube, there's a lovely interview that he gives about first principle thinking. And what's really super about that is he gives you a really good understanding of how to practice it yourself. So basically what you do is you take things down right to the bare minimum. And they did this with the idea of taking a rocket to space. So they thought, how do people take rockets to space at the moment? And they looked at all of these big suppliers and these big massive machineries and all the supply chain, and they looked at all of that and they thought, wow, no wonder NASA is so blinging expensive. And then they broke everything down. What are the fundamental components that are needed to take a rocket to space? The fundamentals. And they were able to bring down the price of building a rocket by 80%. That's SpaceX, right? So that's a great example of first principle thinking. So it doesn't mean always that you need to bring new things in. What you want to be doing at the same time in your business as usual environment is taking it down to first principles thinking, when you can go no further and think, what have we got? What are we trying to achieve? Can we get there? And you might be able to recognize that there's stuff that you can put into that release bucket that I mentioned earlier on. Habit shift. Those of you that know me know that, transformation, personal development is all about recognizing the habits that you need to release, understanding the habits that you need to make better, and getting new habits in that that continue to change you and help you become the best that you can be. Presence. Something that we don't talk about a lot, but presence, mindfulness, and holism, that human and leader that I was talking about earlier on, super, super, super important. Okay, so what's number 3? Super habit. So I think first principle thinking is absolutely amazing. And actually, I'll tell you, there's another book. There's this book. I don't know whether you can see that. Think Like Amazon. There's another one. Jeff Bezos is somebody that advocates first principle thinking. This is a really good book, by the way, for you to read in terms of virtual leadership, but also, something that you might want to share with others. But back to super habit 3, it's experimental practice. The most amazing habit that we can do, the most valuable habit that we can adopt as virtual leaders is experimental practice. That sits in 2 areas. It sits in the ability to thought experiments. Most famous thought experiment person on earth, scientist, I don't know, anybody on chat know who it is? Einstein. Famous thought experiment. The formula of relativity came to him through thought experimentation. So all you need to do is, if you're coming across a challenge or something like that, just think, what would it look and feel like if? And think about it. And you can do thought experiments as groups as well. And you can do, and this is where you kind of have scenarios. So in masterminding, and when we're working with leaders, we've got a huge group of 42 senior execs that we're doing some thought experimentation with next month, which is going to be super exciting. We're bringing in scenarios, and they are going to play out the scenarios. Thought experimentation makes you more prepared. Thought experimentation gives you courage and bravery to act in the moment. Really important. And the other thing is experimental action. So when you actually have something, let's test the possibilities. Instead of, let's work out which one of these 5 things we're going to invest all of our money and all of our time in. No. That's great for agile projects. Fantastic. No, at the beginning, when you've got these seeds of ideas, you need to test the possibility. And it only needs to be a meeting, and then you can ditch it. But, think about how many possibilities can we test? And you personally, I'm going to experiment with this. And experimental action is a really good thing. So I don't know how many of you are on Office 365, but let me throw one challenge at you today. So after this virtual call, off you go and just do one thing. Think about one area of Office 365, and it might be Planner or it might be SharePoint, and go and experiment with it just for half an hour. And see if you can actually learn something new. But experimental action and thought experimentation, really super important. Super habit number 3. And 4, virtual leadership. We need a frame. There is so much out there. I mean, I don't know about you, but I go onto Google every day, and I subscribe to so many different different blogs and so on and so forth, and I get emails and everything. And I've got 5 tips for this and 3 secrets for that, and it's all just white noise. So we really need a frame. We really need some parameters, and that's where the 7 mindsets can help you. So these are the 7 mindsets of digital age leadership, but they're as relevant for virtual leadership as anything else. So for you yourself, your own profile, and the profile of leaders around you, just thinking about these 7 mindsets as your parameters and as your frame is really important. Not development though. Don't focus on weakness. God, as human beings, we always go, where's the gap? Where do we need to improve? No, this is about recognizing our strengths, because from strength we have courage, and then learning and development and gaps, they just become learning instead of failure. So really focus on strength. Being prepared. Wow, this is a big one too, For us, being prepared is vitally important part of virtual leadership. I'm not sure at the beginning of lockdown how much preparedness in terms of a competency there existed as leaders. But coming out of lockdown, I think a learning for us to take is that it's absolutely vital for every leader to have a certain level of competency in terms of being prepared. So what does that mean? Well, what you can see here. So we break it down into what's called a frame of reference. Every leader needs to ensure that they're working on and have a frame of reference that sits in these 2 areas. So the first one is what we call forces of change, and the second one is technology. Pretty simple, pretty easy. What does that mean? Forces of change. What is happening outside? Because it's not just my world. It's not just my sector. It's not just my company. The forces of change around us, it's been proven, right? The biggest experiment the world has ever conducted is COVID-19. So we need to be aware of what's happening externally, just in case it impacts upon us. Preparedness. Yeah. So back to that thought experimentation, because you can take those external environments, those external things that are happening, and you can create scenarios, and you can start doing group thought experiments with them. And the environment. The environment around us, what is happening in different sectors, in politics, what's emerging, 5G, what's emerging, Internet of Things, what's emerging, the shift that's happening with regards to virtual and remote working and living. And when we say everybody, what we mean here is seeing everybody as the human, because what we're seeing is we've got 5-6 generations in the workforce now, right? That's huge. We've never had that before. You know, it kind of sat at 4 for decades, and now all of a sudden it's 5. We've got the gig economy out there. I mean, we use Fiverr to do a huge amount of development work here in the office. We've got the gig economy. We've got the sharing economy. We don't work just through invoices with our suppliers. We co-create sharing economy. So we need to be really aware of what's happening in terms of everyone. So focusing on what are the generational changes. So from the nomad all the way down to the Generation Z, or maybe the Generation C, that might be emerging around us, and also that sharing economy in terms of really bringing everybody on board. Technology, very quickly, well, what have we got here? This is funny, because I think that when you look at the second one, new to you and new to most, you'll recognize some things. And I can see some people on the call who do work in the world of more focused in the world of technology that will probably have a smile on their face. So give me a thumbs up if some of this resonates with you. You've got mainstream technology, and basically mainstream technology is a technology that, you know, like everybody's got now, right? We've all got the basic technology of email. We've all got the basic technology of getting onto the internet with regards to work, not necessarily in remote areas, but you know what? 5G is going to actually change that dramatically for us. So there's mainstream tech in terms of basic communication and basic ways of working that every organization has got. But then there's the stuff that's new to you. Office 365, great example. It's new to you, and you might think it's totally and utterly amazing, but actually it's not new to the rest of the world, because there's a lot of people out there that are using it at a very, very, very advanced stage. So recognizing what's new to you, and then what's new to most. So when things are really starting to become mainstream, and then lastly, horizon. So true emerging technology, so augmented reality, virtual reality. The key thing that I want to say to you here is understanding the different phases of technology maturity. It's kind of important for every leader. We need to be aware of it, frame of reference, be prepared. And why? Because if you know what's coming in on the horizon, if you know what is actually new to most, and that's happening over there, it might be in a completely different sector. It might be in a completely different country. Think about what's happening in Dubai with police and robotics and virtual reality, and you know, the artificial intelligence that they're using there at a government level. That's horizon stuff, but it's relevant to you in frame of reference. So forces of change and technology. And finally, being present. So I said that I would mention this again. Now, being present is really important. And what I mean by that is, and without going all kind of, you know, spiritual on you all, you know, I'm not going to go too zen, but it's really important for us as leaders to be able to give of ourselves 100% in the moment. So don't take the last conversation into a virtual meeting with you. Neither for 10 minutes before the end, don't actually, you know, zone out and start thinking about where you're off to next. It's so important more than ever before to be able to act in the moment when we are leading virtually. So being prepared, being present, and being adaptive. There's a couple of other frames that can help us master virtual leadership, and one is the Givens approach. I don't want to go into too much detail. Just bear with me. I'm just going to do a check on time. So it's 20 past 9 here in the UK. So I just want to speak for another few minutes. The Givens approach is a positive psychology methodology that is absolutely fantastic. Have a look at what it says here: emotional needs, physical needs. Now, the key is what it says is that if any of these emotional needs or physical needs are either not met or out of sync, then the way for us to actually solve them and address them is by honing in on our natural resources. And the reason why I wanted to share this with you is you look at those natural resources. If you were to translate those into virtual leadership or modern leadership competencies, they're all there, aren't they? They're all there. You know, you could replace dreaming and imagination maybe for innovation and creative thinking, but everything is there. So I think this model is absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna, I hope I'm not pushing these slides too quickly. So that's A self-mastery, review and calibrate is what we've got up here. So we've got thinking about our brand, thinking about the power of one, those small shifts, that super habit of experimental practice, framing it so that we're not in a whole kind of like, you know, white noise. We need direction, we need focus. You can only progress if you've got parameters. So there are 7 mindsets. Being prepared and being present. Now, before I just kick on, I just want to just go back into chat and just ask you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Do any of those resonate with you? Which one do you think is the most powerful and the most important? So just pop in to the chat area, the one that you think is the one that really could make the most difference for you. So if you could do that. So number 1, brand. Number 2, the power of one, super habit. Number 3, 7 mindsets, being prepared, being present. What have we got? Let's have a look. We've got 1, we've got 3, 4, 2. So that's really nice. There's a lot of diversity going on here. And what I love about this, and I asked this same question last week, and the same thing came up. What this proves is, looking at everybody talking about which ones are most important or resonate for them, is they're all really important. So to be a really good and effective virtual leader, as well as helping others, we really want to have a consistency and a focus on all of these things. So that's brilliant. Thanks, guys. Okie coke. Right. Very quickly, I am going to dive into remote and virtual working. Now, remote and virtual working, in brackets, living, because come on, you know, we're at home, I'm at home, you know, there's the garden out there, there's the dogs out there that, you know, I don't know how many, you know, 12-30 meetings that I've had, and the postman arrives and the dogs are barking. Our lives, professional lives and personal lives, are merging into one, and it's taking the best of that is really important. But you know, when we're talking about leading others, supporting others, serving others, we need to be thinking about some very, very important things. If the cause was lockdown, I'm not going to say COVID-19, I'm just going to say lockdown. What's the effect? Well, the effect is that decentralization, right? And that's something that is a positive. We've gone from 100 in one place to 100 in 100 different private spaces. So how can we bring decentralization back into the new reality and celebrate it? And the second thing is hyperhuman. Now, those of you that are maybe of a little bit of a marketing slant will recognize hyper personalization as a narrative and a phrase, which basically means I know Mel, so I know your preferences, I know the way that you think, so I know what to serve to you even before you want it yourself. So it might be that, you know, I've bought a product twice and I love it, and all of a sudden, you know, it's like 2 weeks before I need that product and I get an email, or I get a pop-up on my URL. So hyper-personalization. For us, hyperhumanism is the phrase of virtual leadership. But when we are with remote and virtual teams, and you will recognize so much of this, it is incredibly important for us to put well-being at the top of the list. And we've broken well-being down, and this is what we've broken it down into. Everything about well-being really needs to be about positive psychology. And you can see that on the left-hand side. It's so simple, but so profoundly powerful. If we can make and ensure that people are happy, then things go well, right? And that's so important for virtual leadership. But on the right-hand side, you can see 4 areas: building trust. You need to give and receive it. Being authentic is what that's really about. Social silence, social capital, and connection. I want to quickly talk about social capital. Now, we've got some ideas here on the right-hand side. Social capital, for those of you that aren't familiar with the phrase, it's a phrase that Margaret Heffernan uses a lot. And social capital is essentially the human value of connectedness outside of the task that we are here to address. So we might be a group of people in a project team, and what gels us together in a corporate environment is the task and the project that we are here to deliver. Social capital is the human element around it, the connections that we make that are the human connections. If we do focus on that that social capital, then the project statistically is actually going to be more effective and more successful as a result, because we've got that vested interest to help each other and to serve each other and be the best that we can be for each other. So that's what social capital is all about. And we want to really look at some things here. And I'm running out of time, which is a real shame. But what I will do is, if there's anything here that you'd like to know a little bit more about in terms of what social capital elements you yourself or for your leaders you need to be thinking about, then please do drop me a line and I'll go through those. But digital water cooler is a really important one that I'll just pick out. If we're not in that office, that means that you're not at the front door bumping into somebody that might be from a completely different office and you say hello, social capital, a connection. You're not in the lift with a CEO that you don't normally see in your room, on your floor, I beg your pardon. That's one thing. You don't go to the communal toilet and bump into somebody that's in a completely different department. We're not doing any of that stuff at the moment. So how do we create that digital water cooler moment? There's a brilliant app there that I think is fantastic. It's called Donuts, and you can use it. It's got an API with Slack. And basically what it is you've got this app, you deploy it across the whole entire organization. And what it does is it randomly puts two people together, and then it organizes a 15-minute chat, virtual coffee chat with those two people that they wouldn't normally have a chat with each other. It's brilliant. So it's just thinking about those digital water cooler moments is very, very important. And equally, when we're leaders, it's very easy for us to actually just go out of the office and just walk around the room or go downstairs to the canteen and bump into people and just feel, walking the floor and get the essence of it all. It's all gone. So what do we do, and how do we recreate that in a virtual environment? And that really speaks to that multi-channel communication I was speaking about earlier on. So as a leader, what are we doing about just checking in with people, just on virtual chat, or just 10 minutes, just check in. Really important to do that virtual walking the floor. Social capital, so much behind this one that I would love to share with you today, but sadly for time, I'm unable to. This one is really important. Social silence. Just again in chat, just thumbs up. Has anybody done any work? Has anybody delved into this idea of social silence through lockdown and thinking about their own leadership and the leadership of others around them? This is really important, because even when we're in a group virtual environment, we can't sense the energy. Like I said earlier on, you can only see from the shoulders up. So you don't necessarily know what's happening. So your ability to sense is actually kind of being decreased. So we've got to put something back in there. But most importantly, it's about what's happening outside of these meetings. And there might be some people that are not engaging. We want to know, is there social silence that we as a leader need to go and intervene because there is something that's being detrimental to the well-being of a team member or a colleague? And one of our practitioners tells a really great story. So he's an IT director. And what he has done is he's simply said to his team, all I want you to do, this is not micromanaging, all I want you to do is just agree to all work in our cloud environment. So they are fully cloud enabled with regards to their suite of products. So everybody works in the cloud and they talk with each other, and everybody's put all of their settings onto transparency and visibility, which means that everybody can see everybody being active. And what that means then, that Chris, if there is somebody that is not being active or hasn't been active, engaged in terms of engaging for a while, he can go and have a chat with them and just make sure that everything's okay with them. Because a lot of us are not necessarily extrovert or social beings. A lot of people are introverted, and it's a lot harder for them to engage when they're in those environments. Social silence, really, really big thing. I'm just looking at the chat now. Yeah, so Nicola, this is the part of virtual leadership that you're finding the hard. Yeah, absolutely, and a new team. Yeah. Now, just as a as a piece of advice on that one, I think the most important thing is openness. right, is having the dialogue, is not thinking about it, but actually having the conversation. And we have this thing that's called yin and yang. And I'm recognizing that we've gone over here, but let me just do this quickly. So for those of you that need to go, don't worry, I am recording this. If you can stay for another 5 minutes, then please do. So I'll just talk to this yin and yang. So basically what we say is, openness as for a leader is like this. I don't know whether you can see that, but here we've got being vulnerable, being authentic, being human. So being open as a leader. So that's the yin. And then we've got the yang, which is enabling and empowering transparency. So from a structural perspective, you know, sharing, making sure that people have got access. So we want to make sure that there's a balance of those two things. And it's really, really super important for that element of openness to be part of our virtual leadership. Guys, there are some other elements that I would talk through. I mentioned earlier on attention management versus time management. That's a new thing that we've really discovered through the lockdown and virtual leadership. It's a great shift. So please, you know, if you want to know a little bit more about that, just let me know. But essentially, what I want to do is just summarize for you the idea of virtual leadership is not just about what we want our leaders to do or what we should be doing ourselves. It's about first looking inward and becoming role models, being prepared, being present, and championing that openness that I was just talking about earlier on in response to Nicola's comment. But really, really just thinking about self first in order to serve others, and thinking about those three quadrants, our peers, our teams, the entire organization, but also our community, because the lines have blurred. So thinking about those two elements is super important. And then when it comes to virtual and remote working and living, social capital, social silence, leveraging that opportunity and being that hyperhuman. A few other things on there that I can share with you. We've got some materials. We're more than happy to share these things with you. So that's a huge whistle-stop tour into the world and the land of virtual leadership that I'm hoping that a lot of you will resonate with, but also that there's some new stuff in there. Now, for those of you that have managed to stay, I am happy to take any questions. It's amazing that actually so many of you have stayed online, and I'm so appreciative of that. But if there are any questions that you've got, what I'd say is pop it in the chat, or even better, if you can put it on a Q&A, on an email to me. I will endeavour to answer each and every question you have. And what I will do is when I send out this recording and this deck out to everybody, I will also put the answers to all of those questions so that we are being open and being really transparent about this. So I am going to let you guys go now. I've talked about virtual leadership in terms of for you yourself and also for others around you. It's a huge subject. I think it is absolutely the key for us going into a new reality, which is going to be the best new reality for us. Virtual leadership is going to be the key to unlock that for us. I've got some theory into practice questions here, and I know just at the end here there's a chat that's come up. And let's just have a look and see what's here. Oh, it's just some thanks, which is lovely. No worries. That's brilliant. So please remember, send me an email, ask me any questions, and I'll get everything out to everybody on email afterwards. Everybody in Australia, have a wonderful evening. In the UK, wherever you are, have a fantastic day. And hopefully we'll stay connected, and I will see you soon. So please stay safe and take care.